"You're not needed at the wedding, old folks," our son said. We left and cancelled everything. "You're not needed at the wedding, old folks." That's what our son told us, cold, dismissive, like we were strangers. We stood there, stunned, as the child we had raised with love and sacrifice looked us in the eye and cast us aside. The laughter from the house stung even more than his words. So we went home in silence, sat together, and cancelled everything we had planned for his big day. This is the story of how parents who gave everything were humiliated by their own son, and the moment that turned his perfect wedding into something he'd never forget. Hello family, welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request. Please subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten and stories that deserve to be heard. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, because together we are not just telling stories, we are keeping hope alive. My name is Margaret Carter, and I never thought I'd see the day when the boy I raised, the one I sang lullabies to, patched up after school fights and prayed over every single night, would one day treat us like we were nothing more than a shadow from his past. But that's not how our story began. It began with love. The kind of love that makes you forget how hard life can be. The kind of love that makes two poor people believe that if they just hold hands and keep going, everything will be all right. Thomas and I married young. He was a mechanic, smart as a whip, but too humble for his own good. I was a high school English teacher who thought books could save the world. We didn't have much, but we had dreams. And one of Thomas's dreams back in the late 80s was this tiny startup he co-founded with two college buddies. They worked in a dusty garage building computer parts no one thought would ever sell. He sold his share early, just a small stake, but one of his friends convinced him to hold on to a tiny slice, just in case. That tiny slice became everything years later. The company took off, and before we knew it, Thomas's quiet little investment had turned into a portfolio worth nearly $1 billion. I remember when he told me the news. I was folding laundry. "Margie," he said, voice trembling, "you remember that company, Blue Peak Technologies?" "Of course," I said. "The one that nearly drove you crazy in your 20s? He grinned. "Well, looks like it finally paid off." When he told me how much that small stake was worth, I nearly dropped a basket full of towels. "Thomas, that can't be real," he laughed, shaking his head. "It's real, all right, but let's keep it quiet." So we did. We didn't move, didn't buy a new house, didn't flash it around. We stayed in our same two-bedroom home with the squeaky back door, the same old pickup truck, and the same coffee pot that hissed like it was tired of life, because we didn't need the money to feel rich. We already had everything we wanted, our son Daniel. Daniel was our miracle. I had him late, at 38, after years of trying and being told by doctors that it might never happen. When I finally held him, I cried for hours. Thomas kept whispering, "He's perfect, Margie. Look at him." And he was. He had these big curious eyes and a quiet way of watching everything, even as a baby. From the start he was bright, always asking questions, always reaching higher. We raised him to be kind, to respect people no matter who they were. I thought we did a good job. We couldn't give him luxury, but we gave him love, and that to me was the better trade. He grew up smart, disciplined, always at the top of his class. When he got into college on scholarship, Thomas and I cried again. He called me from campus his first week and said, "Mom, one day I'm going to make it big. You and Dad won't have to work another day. That's my promise." I laughed. "Sweetheart, your dad and I like working. You just go be happy." But deep down, I was proud. So proud. Years later, he graduated, got a job at an architectural firm, and quickly climbed the ranks. He called often, until he met her. Chloe Bennett. She was beautiful, smart, and came from one of those old families with money that goes back generations. When he brought her home to meet us, I tried my best. I made my famous roast chicken, set the good china, even wore a new dress Thomas bought me. Chloe was polite. I'll give her that, but she looked around our little house like it was a museum exhibit she couldn't wait to leave. "This is cozy," she said, smiling thinly. Thomas smiled back. "Yeah, built it ourselves. Every nail and board." She nodded but didn't reply. Daniel jumped in, talking fast. "We'll probably move them to something more comfortable once I get the promotion." I remember that moment clear as day. Thomas's fork paused mid-air. I felt my stomach twist. It wasn't what Daniel said, it was how he said it, like we were old furniture that needed upgrading. Later that night, after they left, Thomas said quietly, "You notice how she looked at the house?" "I noticed," I said. "But maybe she's just shy." He snorted. "Shy, my foot! That woman looks at people like price tags." I didn't argue. I wanted to believe Daniel's love for her was real. I wanted to believe she'd grow to love us too. So I held on to hope. A few months later, Daniel called to tell us he was getting married. He sounded so excited that I forgot every bad feeling I'd had. He said, "Mom, it's going to be the biggest wedding in the city. Chloe's family is handling everything. You'll love it." I clapped my hands together, tears in my eyes. "Oh, sweetheart, that's wonderful. Your dad and I are so proud of you." Thomas took the phone and said, "Congratulations, son. We'll be there." When we hung up, Thomas looked at me and smiled. "Maybe this is our moment, Margie. Maybe it's time." I knew exactly what he meant. You see, for years we'd been planning something special, something Daniel didn't know about. We were going to surprise him at his wedding, not just with a father's speech or a toast, but with a gift that would change his life forever. The investment, the portfolio that had grown beyond anything we ever imagined. We'd worked with a lawyer to create a trust fund, one that would automatically transfer ownership of the investment to Daniel once he was officially married. We even wrote a letter to include with it. It read, "Dear son, you always said you wanted to make us proud. What you didn't know is you already did. This is our gift to you, not because of what you've earned, but because of who you are. Remember, from humble beginnings come the greatest blessings. Love, Mom and Dad." It was going to be the happiest day of our lives. Thomas was already writing his speech. I was sewing a new dress. We even started imagining grandchildren. But slowly, Daniel began to change. At first, it was subtle. He stopped calling as often. He missed our Sunday dinners, claiming work meetings or events. Then came the clothes, designer suits, shiny shoes. He used to laugh at that kind of stuff, but now he wore it like armor. One evening, I called to ask about the wedding details. "Sweetheart," I said, "do you know what date to save yet? I want to book time off for the school reunion the same month." Mom, actually, Chloe's mom is handling the guest list. I'll check with her and let you know." I frowned. "The guest list? You mean we have to be approved?" He chuckled. No, of course not. It's just her family's particular about numbers." "Particular?" Thomas muttered from across the room. "Tell them I've got 2 numbers for them." I nudged him, whispering, "Hush." But something about Daniel's tone bothered me. He sounded different, almost embarrassed. A few weeks later, we met Chloe's parents for dinner at a fancy restaurant downtown, the kind of place where they don't give you menus with prices. Evelyn Bennett was everything I expected, elegant, polished, and ice-cold. Her husband, George, barely spoke a word. She leaned in toward me halfway through dinner and said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "You raised a fine man, Mrs. Carter. Let's hope he learns to carry himself like one soon." I blinked, unsure if I heard her right. "Excuse me?" "Oh, don't take it the wrong way," she said. "It's just Chloe's circle is very refined. We wouldn't want Daniel to feel out of place." Thomas's jaw clenched so hard I could hear his teeth grind. "My boy's never been out of place a day in his life," he said. Evelyn just sipped her wine. Of course, Daniel looked mortified but didn't say a word. And that silence, that's what cut the deepest. That night, as we drove home, I tried to lighten the mood. "Maybe she didn't mean it that way, Tom." "Oh, she meant every word," he said, eyes fixed on the road. "She's the kind of woman who thinks respect comes with a price tag." I sighed. "She'll come around." He looked at me and smiled faintly. "You still think everyone's got a good heart, don't you?" "Maybe not good," I said softly, "but maybe capable of good." He chuckled. "Well, maybe we hold off on that big surprise until we're sure he's still our boy." I laughed, but my smile faded fast, because deep down something in me whispered, what if he's not? A few nights later, I was cleaning up the kitchen when my phone buzzed. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. I smiled, wiping my hands on a towel. "Hey, sweetheart, how's wedding prep?" He didn't know I'd answered. I could hear muffled voices, then his voice, clearer. "Chloe, listen," he was saying, a little frustrated. "My parents mean well, but they don't belong in that kind of crowd. Let's just keep the wedding private. They'll understand." My breath caught. I froze, phone still in my hand. Chloe laughed softly on the other end. "You're sure? Won't they be hurt?" He sighed. They'll get over it. They always do. I stood there, staring at the kitchen floor. I don't know how long I stayed like that, long enough for the tea kettle to whistle, long enough for my heart to start aching in ways I didn't know it could. When Thomas came in later, I didn't tell him. I just said I wasn't feeling well and went to bed early. But that night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, one thought wouldn't leave me. He said we didn't belong. Our son, our pride, our miracle. And I thought to myself, maybe the gift we never told him about was never meant for him after all. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd love for you to join our community by hitting the subscribe button. Through our stories, we build hope and give a future to children and women who have been abused all over the world. Motivate us by subscribing and turning on your notification bell so you never miss a story that matters. Also, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from and how did this story speak to you? I still remember that morning like it happened yesterday. The air felt heavy, the kind that presses against your chest before a storm. I was in the kitchen humming while making pancakes, Thomas's favourite, when I heard the knock. It was firm, familiar. I smiled before even opening the door. It was Daniel. My heart jumped. I hadn't seen him for weeks. He looked sharp, like always now. Expensive suit, polished shoes, a watch that probably cost more than our truck, but something in his eyes looked off. Tired, maybe, or distant. "Daniel," I said, wiping my hands on a towel and rushing to hug him. What a surprise! He hugged me back, stiffly, like a man hugging a stranger. "Hey, Mom." Thomas came out from the garage, wiping grease from his hands. "Well, look what the wind blew in," he said, grinning. "Didn't expect you till next weekend." Daniel smiled faintly. "Yeah, I had some time before a meeting. Thought I'd drop by." "Meeting, huh?" Thomas teased. "Can't even visit your old man without squeezing us between conference calls." I laughed, trying to ease the tension. "Sit down, honey, I'll fix you a plate." He shook his head. "I'm fine, Mom. I actually wanted to talk to you and Dad about something." My heart lifted. I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd come to invite us personally to the wedding. Maybe he felt bad for how distant he'd been. I pulled out a chair for him, and Thomas sat across, resting his elbows on the table. "All right, son," Thomas said. "Let's hear it." Daniel took a slow breath, eyes on the table. "Mom, Dad, Chloe's family wants to keep the ceremony small. It's just for their circle. I hope you understand." The words hung in the air like smoke. Thomas frowned. "Their circle? What does that mean exactly?" Daniel rubbed his temples. "It just means it's going to be intimate, fewer people, more private. Chloe's mom has this thing about appearances." Thomas's voice hardened. "Appearances?" He nodded slowly. "So your circle doesn't include your parents now?" "Dad, please." "No, I just want to understand." Thomas leaned forward. "You're telling me your mother and I, who raised you, fed you, put you through school, don't fit in with your fiancé's family?" Daniel looked down. "It's not like that. It's just people talk. Chloe's family has expectations. It's their crowd, their lifestyle. I don't want any tension." "Tension?" Thomas repeated, his voice rising. "Son, you're talking about your parents, not a pair of neighbours you barely know." I reached out gently, touching Thomas's arm. "Let him explain," Daniel sighed, avoiding my eyes. "It's not personal, Mom. You've both done so much for me, and I'll always be grateful. But Chloe's family, they're just different. This wedding, it's a high-profile thing. Press, investors, her dad's partners. I can't afford for it to get complicated." I stared at him, not quite believing my ears. "Complicated?" I asked quietly. "Do we embarrass you, Daniel?" He looked like he wanted to say no but didn't. He just sat there, lips pressed, eyes darting away, and then he said it. The sentence that broke something inside me forever. "You're not needed at the wedding, old folks." The silence that followed was deafening. My hands went cold, my throat burned, but no words came out. Thomas froze, staring at him as if trying to understand whether he'd really heard that. Finally, Thomas stood up. His voice trembled, not with fear, but with rage barely held in. "You need to leave before I say something I'll regret." "Dad," Daniel began. "Leave," Thomas repeated, louder this time. I wanted to stop him. I wanted to fix it, say something that would make it all go away, but I couldn't even move. Daniel stood up, straightening his tie, trying to keep his dignity. "I didn't mean to upset you. I just thought you'd understand." Thomas pointed toward the door. "Go." Daniel hesitated, then turned. As he walked away, he said softly, "You'll thank me later, Dad. I'm doing what's best for everyone." The door closed. And then for a long time there was nothing but silence. I sat at the table, staring at the chair where he'd just been. My whole body felt heavy. Thomas paced the room, muttering to himself, "Our own son, our own flesh and blood, not needed." I tried to speak, but my voice cracked. He didn't even sound sorry. He stopped pacing and looked at me. His eyes were wet, though he'd never admit it. "He's not the boy we raised, Margie. That's someone else now." I buried my face in my hands and cried. The kind of cry that leaves you empty, the kind that hurts in your bones. That night I didn't cook dinner. Thomas didn't touch his tools. We just sat in the living room in silence. The TV was on, but neither of us was watching. The only sound was the old clock ticking on the wall, each second louder than the last. After a while, Thomas stood up. "Come with me." He led me to the bedroom. He bent down and pulled out the metal safe from under our bed. Inside were the documents for the trust fund. The $1 billion investment we'd been saving for Daniel. He placed the envelope on the table. The sight of it made my chest tighten. I traced my fingers over the bold letters on the folder, Carter Family Legacy Fund. "We were going to make him the richest man in the city," I whispered. Thomas didn't say anything for a while. Then, quietly, he said, "Not anymore." I looked up. "What do you mean?" He took the documents out, folded them neatly and slid them back into the envelope. "I mean, we've been saving this for our son. But that man who sat here today, that's not our son." "Tom, no," he said, shaking his head. "It's over, Margie. We're not handing our life's work to someone who's ashamed of us. He doesn't deserve it." I felt my eyes fill again. "But," he cut me off, voice calm but final. "He made his choice. Now we'll make ours." The next morning, Thomas called our lawyer, Mr. Jennings. He spoke firmly, no hesitation. "Cancel the transfer. Redirect the trust." Jennings hesitated. "Mr. Carter, are you sure? That's a significant change." "I've never been more sure," Thomas said. "We're establishing a new foundation. Use the entire fund to support orphans, widows, struggling students, anyone who still remembers gratitude." When he hung up, he looked at me and said softly, "We just gave our fortune to the right people." I nodded. Maybe that's what God wanted all along. But even as I said it, a part of me still hurt, a deep ache that wouldn't go away, because no matter how angry I was, he was still my boy. A few days later, the photos started showing up online. I wasn't looking for them, but they found me anyway. Everyone from church, from school, from the neighbourhood seemed to share the same posts. Pre-wedding brunch for the Bennetts and Carters, family and friends celebrating love and unity. Love and unity. Those words stung. There was Daniel, smiling in every picture, arm around Chloe. Her parents stood close beside them, glowing with pride. And there we were. Nowhere. Not even a mention. Then I saw one photo that broke me completely. Evelyn Bennett had posted a picture of herself holding a champagne glass, with the caption, "So grateful for family that lifts us higher." Lifts us higher. I don't know what hurt more, the words or the way Daniel commented below with a heart emoji. I closed the laptop and just sat there, staring at nothing. Thomas came in and saw the look on my face. "Don't tell me," he said. "He's on the internet pretending he never had parents." I nodded, swallowing hard. He sighed and sat beside me. "Let him have his show. Pride has a short shelf life." The wedding day came. No invitations, no calls, no message. Thomas and I stayed home. I made us a small dinner, mashed potatoes, meatloaf and tea, but neither of us ate much. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of the fridge and the sound of rain starting outside. I looked around the table. There were receipts piled on one corner, cancelled catering orders, suit fittings, hotel reservations. We had planned everything until he decided we weren't needed. Thomas reached across the table and took my hand. "You know what hurts the most, Margie?" "What?" He looked at me, his voice cracking. "That we did everything right. We gave him love, values, everything. And still..." I squeezed his hand. Still he lost himself. We sat there in silence again, the rain falling harder outside. And even though I tried to hold it in, a tear slipped down my cheek. I wiped it away fast, but Thomas saw it. He got up, walked over and held me tight. For a moment we didn't speak. We didn't have to. Later that night, after he went to bed, I stayed in the kitchen. The clock said 11:47 p.m. I was staring at the cold teapot when the phone rang. The sound startled me. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. "Hello?" I said, my voice low. There was silence for a few seconds, then a woman's voice, soft, nervous. "Mrs. Carter?" Yes, who's this? You don't know me, ma'am, but you need to hear this. Your son's fiancée isn't who she says she is. She's lying to him, and to you. I froze. What do you mean? Who are you? I can't say, she whispered, but if you want the truth, meet me tomorrow. Noon, the coffee shop across from the old train station. Please, don't tell anyone. Before I could ask anything else, she hung up. I stood there for a long moment, phone still in my hand, the dial tone humming in my ear. Outside, the rain kept falling, tapping against the windows like fingers trying to get in. I looked toward our bedroom, where Thomas was asleep, and whispered to myself, what more could there possibly be? But somewhere deep inside me, a small, cold voice whispered back, the storm's just getting started. I didn't sleep much that night. After that phone call, every sound in the house made me jump. The wind brushing against the window, the creak of the hallway floor. Thomas slept beside me, breathing slow and steady, but I lay there with my eyes wide open, staring into the dark. Who was that woman? What did she mean by she's lying to him and to you? And why did her voice sound like fear itself? By dawn, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to tell Thomas just yet, not until I knew what I was walking into. The next day, the sky was grey, the kind that promises rain but never delivers. I wore my plain brown coat, tucked my hair under a scarf, and drove to the old train station. The cafe across from it was small, the kind that smelled like burnt coffee and old secrets. I ordered tea and sat near the back, facing the door. My heart wouldn't stop racing. Then she walked in. A young woman, maybe late 20s, with short blonde hair and nervous eyes. She wore sunglasses even though the sky was cloudy. She scanned the room, spotted me, and came over. "Mrs. Carter?" she whispered. "Yes," I said, standing up. "You're the one who called?" She nodded quickly and slid into the seat across from me. "My name's Lydia. I used to work for Chloe Bennett. I was her personal assistant for 3 years. Her voice trembled when she spoke. She looked over her shoulder twice before continuing. I folded my hands on the table. "What is this about, Lydia?" She took a deep breath. "It's about your son, about Daniel, and about what Chloe's been doing behind his back." I felt my stomach twist. "What do you mean?" Lydia glanced around again, then pulled out her phone. She scrolled for a moment, then turned the screen toward me. What I saw made my breath catch. Photos, dozens of them. Chloe, in hotel rooms, restaurants, cars, always with the same man. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Lydia's eyes filled with guilt. "Ethan Parker." I froze. I knew that name. Ethan was Daniel's best friend, his business partner. They'd started their firm together, Carter and Parker Architecture. Daniel used to say Ethan was like a brother. I pushed the phone back toward her. "That can't be true." "I wish it wasn't," she said quietly. "But it's been going on for over a year. They've been careful. But I know. I arranged their meetings, booked the hotels, covered for her lies. I didn't realize how deep it went until recently." I sat there staring at the table, the words echoing in my head. Over a year. That meant it started long before the engagement. Lydia reached into her bag and pulled out a small folder. I couldn't live with it anymore. "Everything you need to know is in here. Dates, receipts, screenshots, pictures. I'm leaving town after this. I can't work for her family another day." I took the folder slowly, my fingers trembling. "Why are you telling me this? Why not Daniel?" Her voice cracked. "Because he won't believe it. He's blinded by her. Everyone around him is telling him this marriage is his big break, but it's not love. It's a setup." My throat tightened. "A setup?" Lydia nodded. "Chloe's mother, Evelyn, has known about the affair since the beginning. She didn't stop it because she doesn't care. To her, Chloe's marriage to Daniel is a business merger. The Bennetts are running out of money. They want access to Daniel's company, his reputation, his future." She leaned forward, whispering, "They think he's on the verge of a huge deal. New investors, government contracts. Evelyn's counting on it to revive their family's fortune." I sat back, stunned. "They're using him." "Yes, and when they get what they want, they'll destroy him." For a long moment, I couldn't speak. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip my teacup just to steady them. Finally, I asked, "Does my son know any of this?" Lydia shook her head. "Not a clue. He thinks he's marrying into high society. Meanwhile, Chloe's been making promises to Ethan behind closed doors. They plan to keep the affair quiet until after the wedding, then use Daniel to secure business power." She looked me dead in the eyes. "Mrs. Carter, I'm not exaggerating when I say, if he marries her, It'll ruin him. I don't remember how I got home. The drive felt like a blur, rain starting to fall, wipers moving slow, my reflection ghosting back at me in the windshield. Thomas was in the garage when I got back, tinkering with an old carburetor. He looked up when he saw my face. "Margie, what's wrong?" I opened my mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. I handed him the folder. He wiped his hands and opened it. I stood there, arms crossed, watching his expression shift from confusion to disbelief to rage. When he looked up, his face was red. "Is this real?" I nodded, my voice breaking. "It's all real." He slammed the folder shut. "That snake! That family's been playing us like fools, and our own boy's walking into a trap!" He started pacing, running a hand through his hair. "I'm calling him right now." "Don't," I said. He stopped, glaring at me. "What do you mean, don't?" "Let me think." "There's nothing to think about," he shouted. "They're using him, Margie. We have to stop it." I looked at him, tears streaming down my face, but my voice steady. "If we tell him now, he won't believe us. He'll think we're just bitter. He's already chosen their side." Thomas sank into a chair, gripping his head. "So what do we do? Just watch it happen?" I shook my head. "No, we won't ruin his illusion. Let truth ruin it for us." He looked up slowly. "What are you planning?" "I don't know yet," I said, though in my heart I already did. That night, after Thomas went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with the folder open. I stared at the photos, the proof of betrayal, Chloe and Ethan smiling, holding hands, kissing, the woman my son loved, the man he trusted. And I thought about Evelyn, the way she'd smiled that night at dinner, telling me people should know their place. Well, I thought, she's about to find out what it feels like to lose hers. I opened the safe again and took out the envelope, the trust fund we'd once planned to give Daniel, the Carter Legacy Fund, all those years of sacrifice, all those sleepless nights. I looked at it and felt something inside me harden. We'd built that fortune quietly, humbly, never flaunting it, but maybe it was time to use it for something that mattered. Not for pride, not for appearances, but for justice. The next morning, I called Mr. Jennings again. "It's Margaret Carter," I said. "I need your help." He recognized my voice right away. "Good morning, Mrs. Carter. I processed the trust cancellation last week per your husband's request. Is there an issue?" "Yes," I said softly. "I want you to make it public." "Public?" He sounded startled. "Mrs. Carter, these are sensitive financial documents. I don't mean the details," I interrupted. "Just the announcement. I want it released as a press notice on the same day as Daniel's wedding." There was a pause. "What should the notice say?" I took a breath. "It should say that Thomas and Margaret Carter have officially redirected their entire investment portfolio to the Carter Foundation for orphans, widows, and underprivileged students. That's all." He hesitated. "Are you sure you want that kind of publicity?" "Yes," I said. "I'm very sure." After the call, I sat for a while, staring out the window. The rain had stopped, but the world still looked washed out and grey. I thought about Daniel as a little boy, his messy hair, his big dreams, the way he used to run into my arms after school. That boy wouldn't have cared about fancy weddings or social circles. That boy just wanted his mom's cooking and his dad's laughter. Somewhere along the way, we lost him. Or maybe he lost himself. Either way, I wasn't going to let him marry into lies. 2 days before the wedding, I made one more call. "Hello, is this Prime Vision Events?" "Yes, ma'am. This is Mark speaking. You're handling the video and sound for the Bennett Carter wedding this weekend, right?" "That's correct." I smiled faintly. "Perfect. I need to send over a special video clip for the highlight reel. It's a surprise from the groom's parents." He laughed. "Oh, I love surprises. What's the file called?" "Truth.mp4, I said quietly. He chuckled again. "Interesting name. I'll make sure it's included." I thanked him and hung up, my hands trembling just a little. Thomas didn't know what I was planning. I didn't tell him. Some things a mother has to do herself. That night, I went to the attic to clean out some boxes. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just trying to stay busy. But then, inside an old chest, I found an envelope. It was the speech I'd written weeks earlier for Daniel's wedding. I'd forgotten all about it, and the paper had yellowed slightly at the edges, but the words were still clear. I sat down on the floor and read it quietly. "Our son Daniel has always been the light of our lives. We've watched him grow from a curious little boy into a man of purpose and strength. Today, As he begins his new chapter with Chloe, we want him to know that no matter where life takes him, love and humility will always be his greatest inheritance. We are proud beyond words. From humble beginnings come the greatest blessings. By the time I finished reading, I could barely see through the tears. I folded the paper back up, held it over the old candle burning on the table, and watched as the flame caught the corner. The edges curled black, the ink disappearing into smoke. When it was gone, I whispered, "Goodbye, my boy." I went downstairs to find Thomas waiting by the door. He looked tired but calm. "You all right?" he asked. "Yes," I said, managing a small smile. "I just finished something I should have done a long time ago." He nodded slowly. "We'll get through this, Margie, one way or another." I looked him, the man who had given up everything for our family, and said softly, "We already have, Tom. We just didn't realize it." That night, as I lay in bed, the sound of rain returned, soft and steady against the roof. I closed my eyes and thought of the truth sitting quietly in that video file, waiting for its moment. The world would soon see who Chloe Bennet really was, and Daniel, our son, would finally learn that some secrets can't be bought, no matter how much they cost. The day of Daniel's wedding dawned brighter than I expected. The morning sun spilled through the curtains like gold, warm and cruel at the same time. Thomas was already in the kitchen, sipping coffee in silence. He hadn't shaved, and the look on his face told me he hadn't slept either. Neither had I. I sat down across from him, stirring sugar into my tea, though I didn't really want it. "You don't have to watch it," he said quietly. "We can just stay here. Forget it's happening." I looked out the window. The sky was so clear, so perfect. "We can't forget our own son's wedding, Tom. Even if he doesn't want us there, we'll still know." He sighed. "You think she'll actually go through with it?" "Yes," I said softly, "and that's why it has to end the way it will." He didn't ask what I meant. I think he already knew. By noon, the city was alive with wedding chatter. Every social media post, every headline buzzed with the wedding of the year, Daniel Carter and Chloe Bennet. Luxury cars lined the cathedral's long driveway. Cameramen swarmed outside. The Bennets had spared no expense. Crystal chandeliers, imported flowers, live orchestra. And in the middle of it all was my son, smiling for cameras that didn't know the truth. From where we stood, just outside the gates, we could see the flashes of light bouncing off the glass doors, hear the laughter spilling into the air. Thomas clenched his fists in his pockets. "You sure you want to do this?" I nodded. "Truth doesn't need permission." We didn't go inside. We didn't need to. The world would hear our silence louder than any words we could speak. Inside, the ceremony began. I imagined Daniel standing there at the altar, proud and polished, waiting for the woman who'd already betrayed him. I could almost hear the music swelling, the violins, the sighs of the crowd, the hum of admiration. Then, right as the officiant prepared to start the vows, the lights dimmed. It was time for the wedding highlight video. A technician rolled the clip, and the big screen at the front of the hall flickered to life. It started beautifully. There was Daniel as a little boy, running through our backyard, laughing as Thomas lifted him high into the air. Our old house appeared, the one Chloe had called quaint. The guests clapped politely at the sight. Then came photos of Daniel and Chloe, smiling, holding hands, their engagement trip, their city apartment, fancy dinners, magazine-worthy smiles. The music swelled, the crowd awed. Evelyn dabbed her eyes dramatically. And then, right in the middle of it, the screen glitched. The music cut off. The screen went black for a second. And then suddenly, Chloe appeared again. But this time, not in a gown, not in public. She was in a hotel room, laughing, whispering. Another figure entered the frame. "Ethan," the crowd gasped. At first, people thought it was a mistake. Someone laughed nervously. Then came another clip, then another. Different nights, different places, same two faces. The laughter stopped. The whispers grew louder. Someone screamed. Someone else shouted, "Turn it off!" Daniel just stood there, frozen. His face went pale, his lips parted like he couldn't breathe. "Chloe?" He choked out, his voice barely audible. She spun toward him, horrified. "Daniel, it's not what it looks like. Please listen to me." The footage kept playing, unstoppable. Every deceitful moment on display, like a cruel mirror reflecting her lies. Evelyn stumbled forward, grabbing her daughter's arm. "Who did this? Turn it off! Turn it off!" But before the technician could move, another message flashed across the screen, this time white text on black background. Thomas and Margaret Carter Foundation established in honor of parents who give everything without asking for recognition. The words glowed in silence. Then another line appeared below it. Funds initially reserved for family inheritance, now dedicated to orphans, widows, and struggling students. The room went completely quiet. Not a sound, not a breath. Just hundreds of eyes reading the truth. Daniel looked up at the screen, trembling. His hands shook as he whispered, What does that mean? The priest stepped back, looking helpless. Cameras flashed again, but this time they weren't for celebration. They were for scandal. Evelyn fainted. Chloe dropped to her knees crying. Ethan was already gone, and Daniel, my son, collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands, surrounded by the wreckage of his perfect world. The lights flickered back on. The guests began to murmur. I imagined the whispers filling the room. Did you see that? His parents exposed them and gave away $1 billion? Poetic justice. The orchestra stopped playing. The decorations shimmered under the heavy silence. And outside, Thomas and I stood together by the gate. I looked at the cathedral doors, and somewhere deep inside I felt peace. Not joy, not triumph, just peace. By evening, the headlines had already changed. Bennett Carter wedding scandal rocks city. Cheating bride, missing partner, and family fortune donated overnight. Reporters called, friends called. We ignored them all. Thomas sat quietly on the porch, reading. I sat beside him, staring at the fading sunset. He said softly, You think we went too far? I shook my head. No, we just told the truth in the only language they understand. Public humiliation. He chuckled without humour. Never thought I'd see the day we'd make headlines. Neither did I said. But sometimes God has to burn things down before he rebuilds them right. 3 days passed before we saw Daniel again. He came to our door early in the morning. His hair was a mess, his eyes red. He looked 10 years older than he had a week ago. I opened the door. For a moment, he just stood there, silent. Then his voice cracked. Mom? I stepped aside. Come in. Thomas was at the table, fixing a radio. He didn't look up. Morning, son. Daniel hesitated before sitting down. His hands were trembling. I didn't know, he said. About Chloe? About Ethan? About any of it? Thomas nodded slowly. No, you didn't. You didn't want to. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Please, I've lost everything. Thomas set down the screwdriver, finally looking at him. His voice was calm, steady. No, son, you lost yourself long before that. Daniel looked at me then, pleading. Mom, please, I was blind. I let them change me. I thought I was doing what was right, what would make you proud. I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. We were already proud of you, Daniel, long before the suits, the parties, the money. But you forgot who you were. You forgot who we are. He buried his face in his hands. I don't deserve forgiveness. No. Thomas said quietly. You don't, but you'll get it anyway. That's what being a parent means. Daniel looked up, confused. Then why give everything away? Why not tell me? Thomas sighed. Because money should go where it can heal hearts, not feed pride. And right now, son, your heart needs healing more than it needs wealth. He started to sob. The sound broke something in me. I reached across the table and took his hand. Daniel, I said softly, we were ready to give you everything. But God gave us wisdom first. He lifted his head slowly. Do you hate me? I smiled faintly, wiping his tears with my thumb. No, we love you enough to let you start over without a safety net. He nodded, swallowing hard. Then he stood, shoulders heavy, and whispered, I'll earn it back someday, not the money, the honour. Thomas stood too and put a hand on his shoulder. That's all we ever wanted. When he left, the house was quiet again, but this time the silence didn't hurt. It felt healing, like the end of a long storm. Thomas walked out onto the porch and sat in his favourite chair. The evening sky was painted in gold and pink. I joined him, wrapping a shawl around my shoulders. He watched the horizon for a long time before speaking. Think he'll ever forgive us? I smiled softly. One day, when he learns what love really costs. We sat there together, side by side, the way we always had, through the hard years, the lonely ones, the silent ones. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like we'd lost a son. I felt like maybe, just maybe, we'd helped him find his way home again. The wind picked up gently, rustling the trees. Thomas reached for my hand and gave it a squeeze. Guess we don't need $1 billion to feel rich, huh? He said with a small grin. I chuckled. No, Tom, we never did. As the last light faded from the sky, I thought about everything we'd lost and everything we'd gained. Pride had cost us our peace, but truth gave it back. Money had promised power, but love had proven stronger. And though Daniel's story had fallen apart in front of the world, maybe that was exactly what it took for him to finally see what mattered. Because in the end, true wealth isn't what you inherit, it's who stands beside you when you have nothing left. And betrayal? Betrayal may take everything from you, but truth will always give back more.